Okay. We have a really interesting several topics for you. At least we find it interesting. I hope you all find it interesting. Let me introduce our panelists. First, I'm Elias, Wein. As Pam mentioned, I'm happy to be with you all here today. I lead a strategy and management consultancy focused on the commercial real estate, primarily on open-air retail companies. And I work with companies on portfolio-wide strategy and execution. I have with me here, we'll go back to front, I have Dirk, who's a managing director, part of the leadership of the advisory group at Green Street Advisors in strategic advisory and services. He works with a variety of companies in the commercial real estate business. Dirk has 25 years of experience in real estate transactions, valuation, restructuring, and advisory services, and he is a gator from this program. Julie Augustyn is a senior vice president with Foundry Commercial's retail group. Prior to joining Foundry, she was with Office Depot for 10 years, where she was responsible for managing the retail portfolio for Depot and Office Max brands for the Eastern United States, including 700 stores in 20 states. And finally, to my left is Andrea Drasites, who's a managing director with the Blackstone Group's real estate group. Ms. Drasites is involved in the asset management of Blackstone's domestic retail investments, including Shopcore Properties, Eden's, DDR, the Cosmopolitan Hotel, and other hotel, office, and multifamily assets. And is a new board member. Welcome.
Yeah. Happy to be here.
All right, so everyone has had a chance to text UF Trends to 22333. So we are going to get started. First, we're going to talk about the sharing economy. Well, let me just set the stage. There are a number of trends, some of them that we've talked about already at this conference, that are global trends that you might not initially think of as having real estate implications, but we want to talk with you all today about the real estate implications for some of these more global trends. So we're going to touch on three. They are the sharing economy, automotive disruption, and changing consumer experience.
Uber didn't begin with any grand ambitions. We started with a few loyal drivers, and today those original 100 friends and 10 drivers have become tens of millions of people in 300 cities across 6 continents.
It's exponential. In the next 6 months, we're going to do more trips on Uber than we've done since the day we started up until now. That's how quickly we're growing.
The future is happening faster and faster. We want to be a part of the future. We don't want the future to happen to us. We have some of the world's hardest problems, super interesting things to invent, and you're doing it with some of the best people in the world.
Give this a try now. Everyone take out your phones. How frequently do you use Uber or Lyft? I should see everyone with their phones out. I know many of your names. I will call on you, I promise. All right. It worked.
It worked.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to toss out the first question to Andy. Blackstone is the largest owner of real estate on the planet. You have many companies that are invested in every property type. Let's focus a little bit on what do you see the impact of the sharing economy on office, hospitality, and parking?
Yeah. So I would say the impacts are pretty broad in a lot of different ways. It all gets down to really who's your consumer and who's leasing your space. So obviously in the hotel space, Airbnb has been a big disruptor and has made us change the way we're thinking about how we're appealing to our consumer, their accessibility, what they want when they're coming to our properties. Relatively, it's still a small percentage of overall supply, but it is, I think, emblematic of what's happening to the consumer. You're looking for choice, you're looking for something different, and you're looking for an experience. So we're very aware of it, and you have to be careful in certain markets where Airbnb has got a bigger presence. For instance, San Francisco, New York, and some of those MSAs, you're having to yield your rates in those markets to be consistent with where you can get space in Airbnb. I think we're going to see more and more of the sharing economy bleed into regular commercial real estate, and you see that in the office space with WeWork. They are now one of the largest tenants of many institutional landlords across the planet. I think it's yet to be seen, the longevity of the concept, but it's something that people want. I mean, there are more and more concepts coming out that are similar, and really it's about, again, having flexibility, consumer experience. They're obviously getting into the We Live business, and we're seeing it bleed into retail as well in the pop-up space. You're having shorter duration leases, new concepts coming out experientially, and people have a shorter attention span. So as we're thinking about credit quality of cash flow and what does that mean when we're underwriting a building, you have to really be comfortable with the fact that there's going to be some uncertainty in the near future. And I don't think that's going away. It's probably going to get bigger. Also, I would say, concepts like rent the runway and other things like that, we're starting to see more and more of them, and those are becoming an integrated part of how people live. And I think Julie will hit on it a little bit later when we talk about consumer experience, but sharing concepts don't have to be in conflict with traditional retail. Many times, for instance, like Neiman Marcus will have a Rent the Runway outlet in their store, and that's a way for the consumer to be introduced to Neiman Marcus, maybe an aspirational consumer. Maybe they wouldn't walk in there before, but now they go in and then they're more likely to start shopping. So there are a lot of things that are on the horizon we have to watch. I think another really interesting one is parking. So I had a conversation yesterday with one of the largest parking providers in the country. They control over 1 million spots nationwide. And right now they are real time feeling the impacts of Uber and other sharing, concepts and driverless cars and all those things. And what they're saying is that, hey, we still have reasons to have parking income. We can have lots where Uber picks up and charge Uber for that $250,000 at a stadium or something and preserve our income. I think those are sort of short-term fixes. I think what you'll really see is that parking demand is going to contract, and that's going to give us the opportunity to start to densify and change uses. And that sort of plays right along with the urbanization trend. And I think that's where, over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll start to see some changes.
How are you thinking about WeWork and some of the others? We touched on this just a little bit.
Sure. So I think WeWork certainly it's interesting from a marketing perspective, but my personal view is it's not too different from some of the other shared office space companies that are out there, like a Regus, but they've put some lipstick on it and made it really pretty and fun, and I think they're taking it to the next level. Do I think it's going to revolutionize the office world? I don't. I think it's going to be a category that's out there, and I think the success depends on the service and that experience, and actually whether it's easy to use and affordable relative to other office space. And I think that's how people are going to start making those decisions.
Yeah. I think another trend just worth mentioning is just densification and sharing space. Doesn't just have to be like a WeWork type concept. It's actually the way we're working in traditional offices now. You're seeing it used to be in the law office 1,000 square feet per person. Now it's down to, call it 250. And people are working in co-working spaces. They call them collision centers and collaboration. And I think that you're sort of seeing that mentality, the sharing mentality, bleed into the way traditional business is being done as well.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I mean, even I've seen a poll similar to this, of a room this size, where it was asking people, what, in a traditional office space, what are your top amenities?
Yep.
Number one was a rooftop deck, and number two was a co-working space even within your office building. And it's that community even within a traditional office space. And that's what I think WeWork does very well, is building a community. I was part of HQ Raleigh, and the local community and the startup programs, the education, that's what they do far superior than a Regus, but they are pushing Regus to offer those programs and do a better job of that. Just in Raleigh, in downtown, new project, where Regus has just signed the lease for the co-working space, and so they're going to be really challenged to go up against HQ Raleigh that speaks so much to the local community. So Regus is going to, in order to be successful, they're going to have to mirror that and to offer programs that really build upon that community. WeWork also has done an excellent job with being design focused and changing with their customers.
Yeah.
I think it's worth just exploring a little bit more what you mentioned about creating that sense of community, and Airbnb has it in their video,
Right.
which is, their tagline is belong anywhere, right? So to me, I think of it as, okay, instead of staying at a hotel, I'm staying at an Airbnb. But I think the way they promote it, and also the way Lyft talks about it, is, would you be willing to drive a taxi? No. Would you be willing to have someone, take a friend for a ride? And that's a lot easier to get behind. Would you be willing to have a friend stay in your apartment? Well, of course you would. And if you can connect through social media and get to know about that person and the other places they've stayed, and maybe there's some friends you have in common, it becomes a way to build a community where it's not so anonymous. And, do we think that it's mostly about, hey, it's cheaper to take my Uber downtown than it is to try to find parking down there? Or do you think there really is something behind that we want to have connections in this, text-friendly world?
Yeah. I think to add on to the panel that was discussing retail yesterday and the focus on the experience and the service, that applies to other industries as well. So we're talking about WeWork in office space. So Liquid Space, which is an online booking app for office space, for temporary office space. Just this week, they announced a partnership with Steelcase, where not only can you temporarily book an office space, but you can also design your Steelcase. They have a couple different packages. They're providing that service of saying, here's your complete office designed to what you want based on a temporary deal. So it speaks to that service and providing that customer.
You want to cover anything more on this? We'll move on. All right. Next, we're going to move on to automotive disruption.
Fasten your seatbelts. Disruption is on its way.
So there's a lot of change coming. We know change is coming with the auto industry. It's here already. We don't have completely driverless cars everywhere, but there's clearly going to be implications for the real estate industry. Who do you think is going to be the biggest winner when we have autonomous driving? Whoa.
Biggest winner.
How many people have responded? Do we have?
Yeah, I don't know. Is there a way to know how many people? Nope.
Okay.
Unless you appear to be done. Give you one more second. Up. All right. A couple more coming in.
Cool.
Interesting.
Okay, let's take one more. Keep your phones out. Which property sector will be the biggest loser? I hope that's not leftovers from the one we
Looks pretty consistent.
Yeah.
All right. Dirk, can
Yes.
you walk us through how you and how Green Street advisors are thinking about the changes that are impacting the different property sectors and what the automotive revolution is going to mean for real estate?
Sure. First, I want to give everybody in the room a little bit of context around Green Street. So it's a small firm, but we have a lot of people that think about this kind of stuff. We have 30 analysts. That's all they do is real estate research. And this is an area where we've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this particular topic. We think there's a transportation revolution, and it is going to have a real meaningful impact on real estate. You heard Andy earlier talk about a meeting she had, I think yesterday, with a parking company. And they are clearly having to think about this already. So it's important, and I think I'm going to throw out a few stats just for the room of things that we think are going to happen. We think vehicle ownership could cut parking needs in half in the next 3 decades. That's a pretty broad statement, and we understand there needs to be some humility in that comment because we really don't know what's going to happen, but I wanted to give you the context around our firm. It's not just me sitting here saying that out loud. We have people that's their job, is to think about this kind of stuff and to do that analysis and to figure out what the trend is and where it's going. And this is, to me, this isn't a trend like acid wash jeans where it's going to go away. This is a trend that I think is here to stay. And another thing that really stood out to me is affordability, because I think how much it's going to cost you is really what's going to change behavior. And if right now it averages about 75 cents a mile to drive your car. So if I told you it would be 1/5 of that, would you still want that car, or would you use a self-driving car or a shared service like Uber? I think the answer is probably yes, or at least you get rid of one car. And we're already I live in Los Angeles, and I'm already seeing this happen with families. People that have 2 kids, they said, yeah, we're getting rid of one of the cars. We live in town, and I'm the only one that needs the car. My husband goes to downtown, and Uber's cheaper, and we just don't really need 2 cars. Yeah. We're already seeing this happen.
Especially with Uber Pool.
Yeah, exactly. It's happening right now. And the next slide we're going to put up, the reason we did this poll is, again, this is some of the thinking we've done on it. Our view is the most impacted here is self-storage. By the way, that was hard for us to write because our firm has loved self-storage for a long time. It's been a sector that's just outperformed tremendously for the last 2 decades. But we think self-storage, because what's going to happen is people are no longer going to have 2 cars, they're going to have 1. But most houses, existing stock, is built with a 2-car garage. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have all this space that you can use in your garage as opposed to having to have a self-storage unit. We think the biggest beneficiary, high-quality malls. We think that they're absolutely going to, the densification, what they're going to be able to do is they're going to be able to get rid of some of that parking, and they're going to turn it into apartments, medical office, all kinds of different uses. And these high-quality malls are in areas where they have that ability to reuse and figure out an alternative use where there's really high value to it. CBD office is one that surprised me because you can ultimately have larger commute times if you're using a self-driving car. I think it provides for folks to live farther out but have a place that they go, and we think CBD office is an area where ultimately it's a beneficiary here. Industrial, I think the jury's still out, but if you think about a self-driving semi-truck, this is fascinating to me because basically it can drive 24 hours a day. All it has to do is refuel. Whereas today, I think truck drivers, I think they're limited to 8 to 10 hours via the union or something like that. So they have to sleep. So what does that do to the supply chain? It makes it much more efficient, I think. And what about the buildings in terms of the throughput? So a lot of different things to think about. But the point I want to make, and I'm going to open it up to the floor, is this is here. It's happening today. In fact, I have a car that I have the ability to use autonomous drive. 25 miles of my 50-mile commute, I have unfortunately, I have a longer commute than most, but 25 miles, I don't touch the steering wheel. Today. I've been doing it for six plus months. So I think it's something that everybody who's in real estate should not ignore it. It's here, it's going to grow, and it's something that you have to start thinking about it. What we do at Green Street, we publish a report called Beyond the IRR Model. So it's stuff like this that, how do you underwrite it? It's really difficult. But I think you have to be aware of it in any asset you're looking at today.
Yeah.
So with that, I'll open up to the floor.
Yeah, and real interesting with the self-storage, with all the changes in retail. Recent ICSC I attended, I overheard a couple different retail developers say how they were getting into self-storage because it has been such a positive growth with self-storage, and it's been a need. But I keep pointing to not only to the AV, changes, but also what we were talking about earlier with the sharing economy. I think that goes right into it. There's a couple different valet storage companies out there that service that downtown, where they'll come pick up your stuff, store it for you, bring it back whenever you want it, as a really storage as a service. And so you add on that implication, and like you're saying, just the change. There's also a couple companies, none that I've seen that have had traction yet, but the Airbnb of a garage, where you could literally say, hey, Dirk, you could store your stuff in my garage versus paying self-storage.
They have that in New York.
Yeah, so it's like you add up all those together, and while self-storage has been such a good property, I think that's something for us all to keep in mind.
And then also people have less stuff. I mean, I think Ron's slide yesterday was a really good example. If you look at the tenant mix and how it shifted just from 2009 to today, people are spending more money on their food, their health, their beauty, their fitness. They're spending less money on goods. And, if you used to say that a traditional retail open-air shopping center would have 80 or 90% stuff and 10 to 20% services, it's quickly becoming 60-40. It's going to probably become 50-50 in the next couple of years. And if people have less stuff, they need less space to store it. I think another interesting video, it's a little bit longer than what we showed you, if you guys have time, Google Tony Seba. He does a really interesting piece on the driverless car revolution and what's going to happen, and makes a few really good analogies. There was a study, I think in like 1990, that said AT&T was trying to figure out if they should go into the mobile phone business. And so McKinsey or one of the other big firms did a study, and they said within 15 years, there are going to be 900,000 people using mobile phones. 15 years later, there are 120 million people using mobile phones. So these kinds of trends really accelerate, and I think we'd all be remiss to ignore them or try to say that things will revert back to the way they were. Things are changing. And I could say in a real-time example in my portfolio, we have a shopping center in Pasadena. on One Colorado, and Dirk and I were talking about this yesterday. It's, a CBD, or excuse me, it's sort of the high street in Pasadena, and we have quite a bit of our NOI comes from parking. And in 2016, our transient parks were down 20%. We have a theater there and a bunch of restaurants, and when we started to dig into the numbers, we realized that that's because people are now taking Ubers. And so that's something that's real. So what we're doing is we're taking back those parking spaces, creating a food district and repurposing it, but this stuff is happening now.
Yeah, and if you look at the companies that are diving into this business, it's companies we all know. Apple, Tesla is obviously out there.
Yeah, GM.
Google.
Yep.
I mean, these are giant companies that have a huge amount of capital that they can spend to actually figure this stuff out. Yeah. And they obviously see a real opportunity. So I think it's really exciting. It's new, makes me a little nervous, but I think really the bottleneck is probably the regulatory environment in terms of what you have to do to the roads to get them comfortable. Because the self-driving is already happening. It works. I mean, like I said, I use it all the time.
And to your point, the affordability is getting there if not already there. So if you think, and this again comes from this Tony Seba video, if you think it used to cost I think the first Google car was like $150,000 was what they predicted it would cost, and 70,000 of it was due to the computer system that you needed to run the autonomous driving functions. And so a few years later, that cost was under $10,000, and I think today the cost is under $1,000. So this stuff is quickly becoming affordable and accessible, and it's gonna change a lot of things. And I mean, it's also more efficient for our broader economy too. If you think about the fact that it costs, or a zip car, for instance, for every zip car they can have 15 users. It's just more efficient.
Well, and let's look at, we know we have an infrastructure challenge here in the country, right? So where I live in Tampa Bay, we have just horrendous transportation system, and it's very expensive for people to own a car. And we talk about this service economy that's so vital to our shopping centers and just to our lives because you can't get your hair cut at Amazon. Well, the person that cuts my hair, what if they can't afford a car? But maybe now they can, or they can afford to be part of a sharing service. And maybe we don't need to build out an infrastructure with all of these, buses and whatnot, because we can use, our systems to be able to find a way around that. So I think the affordability of being able to be transported is big. And then if you're not paying for drivers in your semi-trucks, I mean, the cost of goods goes down, right? So all of a sudden it costs less to buy the things, even if you're buying less of them. And for the people that are in the service economy, or the sharing economy, it's less expensive for them to live their lives. It's not as much of a tax, this transportation. Matt, you have a question? Go ahead. Dirk, housing, can you comment on that?
How different types of
multi, whatnot?
Types of housing. I'm not sure I understand the question.
If you were to put multi on this slide, where would you put it?
I think it benefits, and I'm just saying this off the cuff, I think it would benefit the more suburban stuff because generally the infill stuff's more expensive because you're closer to everything, but if you're in self-driving cars, you might be able to get there faster, more efficiently, and it also gives you the ability, I think that's really the key point, is that suburban would benefit. I think the infill stuff, that's a hard question. I'd like to think more about it before I answer it, because the fact that the guy who wrote this report, he was our lead multifamily analyst, and the fact that that's not on here, my guess is we don't have a conclusion yet. So I don't
but
really...
you mentioned high quality malls, right? And you've got this giant parking field that you can put office and multi in.
Yeah.
Surely there will be a benefit to having multi in the footprint of a mall instead of being outside of the ring road around those A malls. Yeah.
Completely agree. But I think what happens with self-driving, it's going to make everything's more efficient on the roads. So you can live farther out and you can enjoy a bigger house or a little bit more of a suburban lifestyle, but be able to access what you want on the urban front. I personally live in town right now, but I will tell you I use Uber a lot to get around at night, and it is so much nicer than having to drive and park.
Find a parking.
If you have a cocktail, you can only have one cocktail if you're driving. you typically wouldn't want to have more than one. But if you're Uber, I mean, they're just so accessible in the bigger cities, and I think I used it in Gainesville as well. I just feel like this is something that if you haven't used the shared services or Uber or Lyft, I encourage you to try it because it's been a real added benefit to my life from that perspective. So.
Yeah, and it's not even just a night on the town. You know, as a business traveler, you show up in a new town, you don't need to rent a car, have that expense, have the expense of valeting it at your hotel and trying to figure out where you're going. You Uber to where you're going, you have a nice conversation in the car, and you know what that means is not only is the parking revenue going down at the hotels here, but the Tampa airport is going through $1 billion renovation where they're building an entirely new off-site rental car facility and gigantic new parking facility. And they started this planning 3 or 4 years ago. The fourth quarter of 15 was the first quarter that they had fewer people renting cars than there were going and coming with Ubers. Yeah. So are they building now? They haven't even delivered it yet. They've got another 2 years before they deliver it. Are they going to deliver an obsolete facility? And the answer is probably yes. Yeah. They're probably spending $1 billion to deliver an obsolete facility.
But that could be your fleet of your AV sitting there.
Yeah, maybe that's where the fleet lives. That's where the fleet lives.
I'm curious too, as far as we touched on the long haul trucking, as far as how that's going to be impacted, and it leaves the question for the industrial. I'm curious, Andy, as far as hospitality. So the same kind of concept of people that want to just be able to go cross country, sleep in the car. Obviously, there's going to be people, I don't know if I would really want to sleep in the car, but there's going to be some people that do. And have you guys discussed that as far as the impact to those hotels that are there just purely on the interstate for that as a stop point as you're driving?
I think that could be a reality, and especially when you think about actually the really limited service sector, and you think about, call it the Motel 6 of the world, and those kinds of things, where a lot of their business is because you have those truckers who can only work for 8 or 10 hours, stopping overnight, and now if you don't have a trucker, you don't need the room. So there's some implications there, and then it will become another competitive edge. And I think Rachel brought up a great point. I mean, in the hotel business, you're seeing the way people are traveling change. I was talking to somebody yesterday who said every year he goes to the Breakers in Palm Beach, rents a car and drives around, and but the Breakers I think cost like $40 a night to valet, and he's paying $100 a day for his rental car. Ended up just using Uber and saved hundreds of dollars over the 1 week vacation with his family, and it was much more convenient. Didn't have to deal with picking up the car, returning it, calling valet, and all those things. So I think you're going to see some disruption in the way we think about hotel income as well from that perspective. And the rental car industry is definitely going to see some impacts.
Right.
Lots of implications. Pay attention because it's here. And I think if you're out buying any real estate that sits in the red category on that chart, you just need to be aware of it.
Thanks, Matt, for your question. Are there any other questions on this one before? Go ahead, Mark.
I had a question for Andrea. It was based on a comment that you made about repurposing some of the parking. So
Mark, can you hold the mic up a little?
So with anticipation of repurposing parking in the future, it sounds like it's inevitable. Yep. How is that affecting design with new development and redevelopment? And can you provide me some examples of what you're doing?
So real time, what we're doing is studies. A lot of municipalities aren't there yet, and they're not thinking in this progressive way and what's happening with consumer trends, and they're still saying I need 4 parking spaces per 1,000 feet, whatever. So what we're doing is we're trying to be proactive and sort of showing them that things are changing and looking at utilization and actually doing studies, having cameras and people out there counting when people are parking and trying to prove the fact that instead of 4 spaces, you really only need 2. So that way we can start to proactively densify and proactively repurpose our spaces. Because a lot of the municipalities that are the ones that allow us to do these things are still thinking a few years behind. But I think it's really also as we're thinking about design going forward, new properties and repurposing, it's what do we really think utilization will be, and trying to talk to consumers on a real-time basis and say, what do you do and what do you want, what are your priorities, and using that data as well when you're going to get approvals and when you're thinking about what you should have.
Anybody else on this one? Okay, and we'll have time. Oh, I'm sorry. Matt, you have another one? Okay.
What's the effect on traffic?
Makes it better. Oh, do you mean, so on road traffic, it would make, I mean, driverless cars and the sharing economy would make things more efficient.
Safer.
Yeah, safer and more efficient, because if you think about it, I forget the statistic, but call it 60 or 70% of road space is actually not used because we have space between our cars, and you know, you have to have your lanes are so wide and this and that. But if you have really smart and efficient vehicles that are driving in a way where they're talking to each other, and you really only need 6 inches or a foot between cars, and you start to think about that on a macro basis, it really makes traffic a lot better and more efficient. And it's something I think all of us who are, in Dirk's case, who commute, you know, that commute, would really like.
Well, and I can speak from experience. The car is a better driver than any human. It just it accelerates, it decelerates because it senses when the person in front of you is slowing down, and it does it in such a way that it's very smooth. I mean, I'm sure everybody's been in a taxi cab where the cab driver hits the gas. It seems like every one I get in the last 6 months has been that way. But so I think that efficiency absolutely comes into play because it's a machine actually calculating it. It's algorithms.
And you can control the time that the roads are busy too. So if the truckers don't need to be on the road from 8 to 5 because they can work overnight, and you have these efficient vehicles and stuff, I think that would alleviate some of the pressure on our infrastructure too.
It's very exciting.
There's also a company out in Sweden that's working on a platooning system where you would plug multiple cars electronically. They kind of plug into a system. So similarly to what you're saying, Andy, where it's a very limited amount of space between the cars, and you'll have 4 or 5 or 6 all sort of plugged in together behind a semi-trailer that might be driven by a human. And they're seeing gas reduction of 20%, right? So now all of a sudden you have less traffic. You can go farther. It's cheaper, but it's also cheaper in part because we're spending less on gas. So this is also increasing our fuel economy, which is fantastic. Any others on this? Oh, several. Dan, yes.
Right. That's a good question.
I think my view on it, Andy said it earlier, is you have to prove to them that this is the case, and then you have to look at what the zoning will actually allow you to do. So if you can get through zoning, and then the capital says, well, I don't understand it, there's going to be all sorts of case studies. One is in San Francisco. I had dinner with somebody from Equity Residential. They just built a really nice facility, residential tower there, 1.5 per on the parking. And they said, we built too much parking. We already know it. 6 months into stabilizing the project, they already know they built too much. So I think there's going to be lots of case studies and lots of examples that you can point to that will support the case, and I think the smart capital will get it. But I agree, there probably is a little bit of a lag, but I don't think there's going to be as much of a lag as everybody thinks because this is happening so fast. The fact that Andy had all these examples of how the parking company is dealing with the situation in terms of not seeing as many cars come in, the transient down 20%, it's happening right now, and it's happening fast. And the reason is because it's affordable, and the technology's there, and I think people, especially in the major markets like where I live in Los Angeles, it's fast adoption, with all types, the millennials all the way through, folks that are retired. Everybody uses it. They're comfortable with it. So.
And to your point, Dirk, it's more convenient. And people are seeking out convenience as we're working more hours and our time is more precious. It's what can make my life a little bit easier.
I think it's a very good question, though, because right now marketing in the CBD for office, parking is a big need and amenity for today. So, while we're all saying these trends are coming today, for those that have the car that need to get and park downtown. So I could see the question.
And you don't want to end
it's
up
got to
like
be
the
future
airport.
looking.
Yeah. You don't want to end up like Tampa Airport. You don't want to have all this.
Right.
Okay, we're going to take one more on this, then go to the next one, and then I promise there'll be time at the end. Yeah.
Jobs.
Yeah.
Traffic engineers, the number of them will drop off. If people don't have good paying jobs, they can't buy a house, they can't rent space, they can't rent an apartment. What will replace the jobs taken over by artificial intelligence in just driving cars?
That's a harder question to answer. I think look at Detroit, lost a lot of jobs there, and I think it's just reinventing yourself. You can get rid of that, by the way.
Yeah. We're not ready for the next one. So.
I don't have an answer for you,
Don't
but clearly there will be disruption in a number of different industries because of this, and I think it's just reinventing yourself around whatever your skill set might be. And if you're a truck driver, I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a program. Maybe the government puts together a program where they're help them get more training so they can go back to school and do something else. I have no idea.
Yeah, I can speak to personally. My brother was a long-haul trucker for, just over 5 years, and it's a tough job. And he recently is making a transition. He's going to go more computers for his job. So there's going to be transition. I know Amazon Go, when they announced their basically no employees within the store. What is it, like 2 employees for the entire store? And how they're basically getting rid of the cashier. That was a big criticism of, wait a second, you just got rid of all these employees. Cashiers are one of the largest employment groups within this country. And then, but it was a similar discussion of, well, all right, was it going to be more quality of a job? Is there going to be a difference of jobs available? So it would be a transition.
I think we see that over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
But it's a good question.
All right, I'm going to introduce this last section on consumer experience. We talked a little bit about it yesterday in the retail panel. We're highlighting Home Shopping Network, HSN, which is a little bit of a non-traditional retailer for many of you. You may never sit up late at night and watch HSN. I don't, I promise. But something you may not know is they have first of all, they're headquartered in St. Petersburg, so I wanted to highlight a local company. But they have a series of brands called their Cornerstone brands they were catalog businesses, and they're thinking about them very differently. How can they create an experience for the customer that used to just be in catalog? And so we're going to walk through 3 different pieces here: augmented reality, pop-up shops, and store within a store. This is a presentation that Mindy Grossman gave at the National Retail Federation.
So we opened our first Ballard Design Studio store last year in King of Prussia, and recently opened our second in Tyson's Corner right out of Washington, D.C. So as other brands are shrinking their retail footprints, we're investing in this new area of experiential retail growth where we have the data and we have the customer knowledge to drive our own traffic in key markets and expand the consumer touch point for our brand. It's a very experiential retail destination, and it brings service and customization to a new level in a modern environment that inspires consumers to become their own decorator and designer. So we also recently launched an augmented reality design solution for our Ballard and Frontgate customers. Leveraging the capabilities of a personal mobile device and an installed app, users are able to virtually place desired objects in their own homes and engage with more than 1,000 pieces of home decor and furniture. So it's a very easy to use app. It utilizes the device's camera to scan the room and then overlays the product in a realistic 3D immersive experience, showing the size, color, and aesthetic of the furniture in that specific room. Our Garnet Hill brand has created an innovative, transportable boutique made from an old shipping container. So it's a pop-up boutique which offers customers an opportunity to physically engage with our product assortment through an immersive brand experience outfitted with digital terminals for easy checkout. Our Grandin Road brand, until now only available in our catalog and online, especially for all our Halloween decor product, debuted its first ever interactive retail haunted house concept store at Macy's in Herald Square, complete with magic, mystical accessories, and elegant decor. So the seasonal pop-up is really designed to inspire, engage, interact, and entertain through the months of September all the way to Halloween. So this collaboration is a great opportunity to drive brand awareness for Grandin Road and traffic for Macy's. So yes, we believe in transformational collaborations, even with other retailers, where together we are even more powerful and can create a greater experience and customer acquisition.
All right. I don't know what a mystical accessory is, but I really want one.
Mystical
After Mindy told me about it. All right. So if everyone can take out their phones, we're going to try this one last time. We've got 2 questions.
We're interested.
Yeah. How often have you visited a department store in the past 6 months? Department store, Macy's, JCPenney, Kohl's, not Target, not Walmart.
Nordstrom, yeah.
Nordstrom, Neiman's.
It's better than I thought.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than I thought, actually. Yeah. Okay, so about half of you have been to a department store 1 or 2 times in the last 6 months. Okay, it's still not that many trips, but yes. Okay, if everyone could stop on this question, if you haven't gotten it already, so it doesn't go to the next one. Give it just another second. Okay, we're going to switch over to the next one.
None was growing.
Yeah.
Are you an Amazon Prime member? Okay, we're going to toss this one out to Julie first as our recovering retailer on the panel. What do you see as the largest changes facing retailers today? And how do you think those changes are going to impact the way we shop? And let's assume we're not just talking about this from a retail perspective. You know, everyone in the room is a consumer. How are we going to change the way we consume goods?
Yeah. I love seeing this. This is really what we thought. I actually thought it might have been a little higher.
Me too.
A little higher, but not much as far as just the Amazon. I mean, that just really speaks to what a giant they are and continues to be. You know, to go back to the video with HSN, I wasn't aware that they were doing that until Rachel brought that video to my attention. I looked into it further. I'm going to be attending a conference next month on a shop talk that's all e-commerce based and e-commerce going into bricks and mortar. And, you know, she's one of the keynote speakers, the same thing. So, you know, I just, after the college football national championship, I cut the cord. I no longer have full cable. I switched to Sling. And I think that that's probably a lot of their driving. HSN is probably seeing that longer term as well. Not as much cable viewership, but more on our phones. We're more and more on our phones. So I think that's really interesting and makes a lot of sense for HSN to invest more in mobile and in some of these other experience and AR, VR. I think that's an overall trend. I loved the retail panel yesterday on Ron's comment, it's not in the future, it's today. We want service and experience now. That's, and the retailers that get it are succeeding. A great example is Holiday, 4%. There's all this talk about Mallageddon and, but 4% Holiday sales were up. And was 1.6% of that was positive sales growth within brick and mortar only stores. Yes, 42% of the growth that we've seen last year in retail has been e-commerce, but if you're a retailer that is continuing to show negative comps, in a time period that retail is still growing, that our economy is continuing to grow, that's a concern. So as far as the, when we were talking, again, going back to the panel more yesterday, and I'm, Dirk, interested, Green Street's said 15% of the malls are going to be obsolete and going forward. I think it's a very interesting statistic too when you think about US. We've got 24 gross leasable area per capita, per person. That is far and away our, Australia is the next with 10. So, and when you look at that as far as high quality retail, about 4 square feet of that is high quality retail. The people in this room, we already know that the high quality, you guys already said, the high quality is going to be the one that we're going to see succeed, and a lot of these trends we're talking about is going to continue to get better for those high quality retail. And the low quality retail, as we all said as well, some of these trends overall are going to impact low quality retail even more. And so I was just curious as far as what more you could add to that.
So we think a lot about the mall space at Green Street, and my team has worked with a number of retailers, including Macy's. It's public that we work for them. So we've definitely seen a lot of this, and our view is there's really 300 malls that matter. There's 1,100 of them that in existence today, and I think if you asked us 18 months ago, we would have said, yeah, the B mall is still relevant. Today, it's a question mark because of all the trends we're seeing in retail and what's happening in retail. And in fact, I think it was announced today, JCPenney's just closed.
Yep. 140 stores, 14% of their fleet.
So this is a trend that's not going to be isolated with JCPenney's and Sears, which everybody in the room is probably familiar with the distress there. We're going to see this happen, and we know this is happening with retailers where everybody's are going to raise their eyebrows and say, whoa, that's interesting. And it's just where the market is headed. If you're an apparel company, you're probably looking at shrinking your footprint today. And that's not one store. That's probably every concept that's out there that's national in scope. Because ultimately, they're just not getting the comps that they need to actually support the footprint they currently have. And why? It's because people are if they go to the mall, they're looking for an experience. They're not looking to necessarily go in and shop the way a lot of us in the room grew up, going to the mall on the weekends and spending 5 hours there, going to the food court and eating and doing whatever we do. It doesn't work that way anymore. I office in Newport Beach, and there's a mall there. It's Fashion Island Mall. It's one of the highest quality malls in the world or country. And the more and more this trend seems to penetrate the country, they seem to be ahead of it. And a lot of the tenants are really moving to showrooms. Tesla, Lincoln, like Perch, if you've heard of Perch.
Perch, Bonobos.
Yeah, it's that's where this is headed. So anyway, just a long-winded way of saying that, we are somewhat negative on the mall space, especially if you're below B quality, but even B quality malls today are going to be more challenged than they have in the past. And that's because a lot of what we refer to as shop space, not necessarily an anchor, but the shop space, the apparel, the guys that make up the middle of the mall, a lot of them are going out of business. And it doesn't take a ton of tenant loss to really impact the value of the mall and, frankly, the experience of going to that mall. When you see a lot of vacancy, it's not very fun, right? You're like, it's creepy.
And retailers are starting to think about their locations in a different way. It's almost, there's an integration now, and a retailer will say that the value of their omni-channel shopper is 3 times the value of a single-channel shopper. So they still have to have locations. But I think Dr. Ling said it earlier. It's not necessarily about the MSA, but it's about the micro-location within the MSA and the very, very particular things that that people are looking for around tenant mix. And if you have the right location in the market, you're still relevant, and the retailer still wants to have a place because the consumer will go in there because they want an education. And Best Buy is another great example. They've sort of rebounded. Everybody thought they would die, and this came up yesterday. And part of it is not just their integration with e-commerce, but part of it is the fact that they now have more educated and better salespeople. So you go into the store to find out, even though you may order that TV online, there's still a value because you're going to the store to find out what's the difference between that Samsung and this Sony or whatever it is. And so I think that's going to be a continued focus.
Yeah.
And
so who do we think is getting it right? Best Buy is getting it right. Who else do we think is getting it right?
Perch is a great example.
Perch is really good.
How many people have heard of Perch? P-I-R-C.
Think of very high-end kitchen and bath, and it's such an experience. And this one surprised me. If you want to take a shower, like if you like the way the shower,
Right,
they'll
you're
let you
testing
take a
out
shower.
Yeah. They've got 15 different of the fanciest shower heads all in there. You
Yeah,
can go
it's
and take a
crazy.
shower. They're cooking on these gourmet kitchens
Yeah.
that you can go and test out the appliances on. Go ahead, yeah.
Here's two other interesting examples. One is restoration hardware.
Yeah,
Sure.
and their galleries.
Historic buildings in various cities and turning it into not only repurchase, but also it's a whole experience.
The lifestyle of that, right?
Absolutely.
The
And
galleries.
also in New York City, there is a location called Story.
Yeah.
Sure,
Love
story.
Story.
Yeah, every 6 or 8 weeks they completely redo the store and they have different themes. I'm lukewarm on Resto. I don't know about the rest of the folks. I mean, beautiful, beautiful stores.
I didn't know we were calling it Resto.
Oh, yeah. The cool kids are calling it Resto. So, but they're spending, I think it was 16. It was either 16 or 60. I know it's a big difference, but to do in one of the Taubman malls, I want to say in Houston, to do the new restoration hardware, and their sales have really tanked. I think, and the price point is not hugely different from Pottery Barn or some of the other peers. But it's very, it's a perception thing, right? I don't know. I go into this beautiful new store that we have in Tampa. I'm the only person there for the whole time I'm there. So I want them to be successful because I love what they're doing, but people still need to go and buy. Yeah. And it has not translated. Gary Friedman? Gary's vision has just not, I don't.
It translated
He likes to
in
say he
Newport
wants
Beach.
to delight the customer, right? We should delight the customer, but we just want them to buy.
Yeah, in Newport Beach, this store does very well, actually. Yeah. It's a concept that works there, but again, that's kind of a bubble in itself. So
Yeah, I think this is Story. It's a store in New York that rotates like a magazine and it presents it. I think that speaks to a lot of the overall trend of the, you want change and you want,
pop-up
Right, you
trend.
want to go
Pop-up
in.
trend,
You want to
right.
see what's new and what's different.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
As anyone that knows me, I'm a huge Rent the Runway. This is a Rent the Runway dress, and Andy spoke to it earlier as far as Rent the Runway. You would not think that Neiman Marcus would invite a tenant within their store that is renting dresses, but yet it is. We talked about the aspirational part of that, and I also could speak as far as from a physical store and how now physical store, you hear it again and again, retailers that have physical presence, how that is a multiplier for their online sales, or in the case, JCPenney has said it, in the case of closing stores, how they see that as a subtraction on their e-commerce. So yes, by all means. So I would rent dresses from Rent the Runway on an occasional basis. Once I went to their Las Vegas store, I became an unlimited member, which means
At the Cosmopolitan
monthly.
Hotel. Good
Yes,
job.
yes.
At the Cosmo Hotel. So it's just, to me, it's just a personal example, and I know from my own shopping patterns that when you have a physical store, you mentioned Best Buy. So also to touch on the panel yesterday, I thought it was an excellent discussion as far as plateau. I believe that there's going to be a much higher plateau than the 10% catalog. Great example is bookstores. So we saw a plateau of 42% of books online. And then no surprise that Amazon then is opening bookstores as 6 confirmed locations, and now they're opening other locations. But we had a discussion earlier. That's awesome. That's more than books. It's about this Amazon Prime.
Right.
They want
Right.
more and
It's a
more
very
Amazon
sticky
Prime
customer.
members.
And as they can figure out the last mile logistics and make it profitable, it's just going to become easier and easier. And so it's the UK today I think is closer to like 20%, and so it's going to happen, but that doesn't mean
Right,
the death.
20% online, overall retail.
Overall retail. But it doesn't mean the death of retail, it just means it changes. So you have to think about either something that's driving an experience or something that's driving a convenience and a reason for people to go.
I
Click and
completely
collect,
agree.
kiosks,
Yeah,
whatnot.
and hopefully my comments weren't overly negative,
Yeah.
but retail is changing, not just in these
Right.
high-end markets, but all over the country.
Right.
We're seeing it.
But
And-
from your slide earlier, you're bullish on A-quality malls. You're bullish on those 300.
Yeah,
CBD
it's
office.
probably
And-
the
yeah.
best investment you can make in real estate is
Right.
a
It's-
super high-quality mall today. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but that's true.
And those A-quality malls have seen an increase in mall traffic. There's a decrease in store traffic at those A-quality malls because more than 50% of our shopping decisions now per Forrester are driven digitally. So I know going into that A-quality
Yep.
mall
Right, I'm
which
buying
stores
more than
I
I'm
want to go
shopping.
to. So GGP has said they've gone from 5 to 7 store visits per mall visit to now about 3 to 5, and it makes sense.
And
If I
GGP is a
already know
great example.
where I want to go,
Right.
yeah.
And they're now, I think they're the second largest landlord for Dick's, right? So
Right.
they're agnostic to, retailers are becoming agnostic to the type of location they're in. They just want to be in the right location, the right micro location. We're going to open up, we have just a couple minutes. I don't want to keep you all from your break. We have just a couple minutes for questions. If anyone has on any of the topics. Yes.
I was with somebody a couple months ago that's starting on development of a big mixed-use tower in West Palm, and he said something I'd never heard before. He said, I'm building all my parking decks to 10 feet because I think in 10 years I'm going to recapture half that space, and in 20 years I have no idea, maybe 3/4 of that, but I had never heard, we were talking about doing away with it today and trying to get everybody to be forward thinking in the problems. I'm curious if any of the panelists have heard others, not so much doing away with it today, but trying to be very thoughtful and say, I want to get going, I'm not going to get done today, but I want to be able to adaptively reuse the space in 10 years or whatever the number is.
I think that's smart. I don't have any personal examples of where people have developed to a different standard so that they can have that flexibility. But I think that's actually really smart.
Right.
It's probably a little more expensive, but I think in the end, he'll win.
Right.
Yep.
I agree.
Actually, there's a parking garage on Lincoln Road. It's designed by, the name escapes me, but it's a famous architect, but it's that fancy parking garage on Lincoln Road in downtown. Yes, it's built like that specifically so that it can be condos in the future.
Yep.
Parking now. Yeah. Ariana?
Yeah, so back to the office space, I know we talked a lot about co-working spaces, but something I see as a millennial and as a trend is also working from home. And I wonder how you guys think that will affect the amount of office space needed when people are going into the office less.
Yeah. So I was a previous job, at Office Depot. Like I was a regional employee. I had the flexibility to either work out of my home or work out of the loading dock area of a retail store. And I chose to personally pay to be a part of HQ Raleigh because I wanted to be around the energy and community of especially like the startup scene, like just that energy that I got from there. It's like, I think that people still want to be part of an office community.
Yeah, my comments, when I commented about Regis and WeWork, I think that's where WeWork got it right, where Regis was wrong, is creating that community and a little bit more of an atmosphere that you'd want to be in. Whereas Regis, and I've actually officed in Regis, it's very generic. It gets the job done, but it's, it's,
Right, doesn't have much personality.
It really, it didn't for me at least.
Yeah. They're changing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up with that one. So we have a break for 30 minutes, and 11 o'clock is the next session. Thank you.